Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is noon Eastern, 11 Central our time. So we're going to get started and go through a few introductions and some housekeeping. I'll start out. I am Heather Prenovo. I am an SLP and training and implementation specialist with PRC Saltillo, and I'm joined today by two lovely ladies, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Right. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Deanna Morrow. I'm a speech language pathologist at Focus Beyond Transition Services in St. Paul, Minnesota.
And my name is Michaela Smith. I'm currently an assistant principal at Focus Beyond Transition School, but formerly was a travel instructor.
Perfect. We are going to turn off our camera and go through some of that housekeeping, as I mentioned, but we'll save on the bandwidth here. So as we get started, our presentation today is Starting Sooner, AAC Skills for Success in the Real World. If you are looking for ASHA CEU credits, please make sure that your Zoom name has your first and last name that matches what's on your registry and what's in your AAC Learning Journey account. If you need help with that, I have Beth Waitla-Fever and Courtney Maholtz watching our chat window. They're happy to help you and point you in the right direction, but go in and make sure that you have that in there, as well as make sure you have your ASHA number in your AAC Learning Journey profile, and they can help with that. If you are just wanting a PD certificate clock hours, that will come out after attendance and everything is looked at. You do need to attend the full hour to get credit for that. So please stay logged in for the whole hour. We did a little brief introduction, but here's some of our disclosures that we wanted to share with you. Our presentation today will be looking at PRC Saltillo products and applications with the strategies we're discussing for AAC with a wide variety of individuals. Deanna, I'll let you talk about your disclosures.
I am a speech language pathologist for the St. Paul Public Schools. I'm an ASHA member and SIG 12 member, and I am getting a stipend for presenting today from PRC Saltillo.
Hi, Michaela Smith again. I'm currently an assistant principal here at Focus Beyond Transition Schools, formerly a community travel instructor. I am a AER member, which is the Association for Education and Rehabilitation of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and I am also receiving a stipend.
Perfect. And as I mentioned, I'm Heather Prenovo, a speech language pathologist and training and implementation specialist. I'm an employee owner of PRC Saltillo, and I'm also an ASHA member and SIG 12 member. And this will be worth 0.1 ASHA CEUs. So getting started, here is our agenda, just brief. We're going to be talking about AAC in the real world, as our title mentioned. We want to look at safety and self-advocacy, wellness and sexuality, and then community and travel. And our big thing that we're going to be talking about today is we work with these transition-aged young adults, but what are the things that we could be doing with all ages to get them ready for the real world? And I won't read these, but here's the learning outcomes that we want you to take away from today. So a little bit of background. I'm going to have Deanna talk about Focus Beyond.
Focus Beyond Transition Services is a program in the Midwest portion of the USA. We are within an urban school district, and Focus Beyond serves 18 to 21-year-old students. We are working exclusively on transition skills, and those fall into three areas: post-secondary education and training, employment, and independent living. And as Michaela and I have worked together for quite a few years, formerly in Michaela's role as a travel instructor, we recognize that in order to achieve these goals for young adults, there are two things that are really critical for them. You have to be able to communicate to get a job, and you have to get there. You have to be able to get to work in order to work. So
Key piece.
Key piece.
Yes.
So when I started working at Focus Beyond in the early days, I was noticing some things about the 18-year-old students who were coming into our program. For example, a lot of them didn't have a clear and reliable way of introducing themselves, of just saying their name in a way that an unfamiliar listener or a stranger would understand them. I also noticed that they weren't comfortable always asking for help. They didn't know how to go about that, how to be aware of when they needed help, and know on a communication device how they could do that. And also, we were out in the community all the time with our students. We are a community-based program. And many of the students, when we stopped at a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant for lunch, had never ordered their own food. So some of those just typical young adult type communication skills, they really didn't have in place at the age of 18. And that got us all thinking about, what could we do sooner in life, even in early childhood and at a very young age, so that by the time they came into a Focus Beyond type program at the age of 18, they have those skills in place. What about you, Michaela? What did you notice?
Yeah. So as a role of a travel instructor, I was supporting students utilizing public transit to get to different community items. It might have been to school or to other spaces in the community that our students need to go to, including work or just recreational activities. And one thing I noted is as a transition IEP, it actually starts at age 14. And goes all the way through age 21. And many of our students that didn't communicate with their voice and had different modes of communication, they were often kind of not being served in that way. They didn't have access to some of our services as far as being able to utilize public transit in that way. So thinking again, how do we support our students and young adults who have some different needs, are very capable young humans, and how do we make sure they get there sooner?
And then I kind of tied things together, my background with as an SLP, as well as I worked closely with Deanna and Michaela in the schools as an AAC consultant, and starting to figure out what do the systems have in place? What are the vocabulary files have available that maybe we could utilize better? Or what do we need to add in? And we'll talk about some of those modifications as well, but then also bringing some of the parent and caregiver input and other team members, what they're noticing. And a lot of what we were hearing was, we were maybe not giving them enough credit that they could be traveling, they could be asking for help, they could be ordering. So what could we be doing to help foster that and build up that confidence and that independence? So we tied it all together. And some of the questions we asked, what are the skills that are important to be practicing? So as you said, what could we be doing earlier so that when they got to Deanna and Michaela, that they had it wasn't new, it wasn't brand new out of the box, right? And when should we be practicing? When should we start? Do we start this at 2? Do we start this in 2nd grade, 8th grade? There's a lot of places we can start. And how much practice does this really take to get them ready for adult life? Because what they were noticing and what I have observed in many districts and clinics is that 3 to 4 years in a transition program is not enough practice if that's when we're starting. And that brought this invitation for us that we want you to consider. Start sooner and start practicing these skills as early as you can so that they have all that time.
Okay, the first area that we're going to talk about today is safety and self-advocacy. So this is obviously an extremely important area for our young adults as we're getting them ready to launch out into their adult life, into the real world. Being safe and being able to advocate for themselves is critically important. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about what I do at Focus Beyond with my students at this age. So at the age of 18 through 21, we'll illustrate some of the examples of how we work on safety and self-advocacy at a transition program. And then I'm going to turn it over to Heather, and she's going to give you some examples of how you could start working on these young adult type skills at a younger age. So let's take a look. One of the most important critical communication skills for safety and self-advocacy is just advocating for the use of a device. Our students are out doing work experiences in the community. There are workplaces where you're not allowed to have a phone out, you're not allowed to have a device. Sometimes our students have been asked to put their devices away. It's really important that they have a way of advocating and telling someone that this is a communication device and I need this out and available with me at all times. There are other skills in this area, such as asking for help, being able to say, I need help, or on a job, I need a break. Those are two really important messages. They may also need to advocate for things that help them to stay regulated, such as I need a walk, or I need some kind of sensory input. I need to listen to music. I need some kind of an oral stimulation. And then self-advocacy around things such as asking for more time, or the need to use visuals, or possibly things like, I need a quiet place to be able to ask this question and talk to you about this. Here's an example of one of our students. Michaela and I were working collaboratively with him. In fact, we were in the room with him during this video, and he was just beginning to learn how to book his own rides on Metro Mobility, which is a service for people with disabilities to get door-to-door pickups and drop-offs rather than using a public bus. So here you'll see this student making the phone call to Metro Mobility to schedule his own ride.
Thank you for calling Metro Mobility East Zone, service provided by First Transit. Your call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes. To speak with a reservationist, press 1. To check on or
First Transit, this is Angel.
Hello, this is an iPad, and I'm using it to help me speak.
Okay, so how can I help you?
I need to schedule a ride.
So there you could see and hear this student beginning the phone call by just letting the person on the other end know that he's using a communication device to help him with the phone call. So very important in that setting where she can't see him and she doesn't know what that device is and why he sounds the way he sounds on the phone call. But a really good skill to have in many different settings.
Definitely. And it's kind of fun. I met him back in middle school. So to see the progression that he wasn't always this self-starter advocate, but he definitely was one that needed reminders at first to get the device out and have it available all the time. So to see it come full circle is really fun.
Andy was really able to take ownership in that process, which was also huge to be able to set him up for success and be able to remove some of the adult supports.
Here's an example of another student at his work site. He's working currently at Walgreens, and he's with Adam, who is his job coach. So Adam is an employee of Focus Beyond who goes with the student to the work site and assists him. So I just want to set this one up because you're going to get a kick out of this because it's utterly and completely fake. It's a setup, and you'll see that right away, but it is not to be missed. It's just a really delightful and charming video. So we're going to show it anyway, because sometimes it actually is authentic. This one just happens to be a setup. But one thing that I really want you to notice about this video is that the student has the communication device on a carrying strap, and he's wearing it sort of satcheled across his body. And in the years that I've been doing transition services, I've come to realize that a carrying strap as a way of having that device physically on your body at all times is the most important thing. It's the one thing that I always order with devices when I'm obtaining devices for students. And that would be a great thing to start really early in life, is starting to build tolerance for students carrying their own devices with a carrying strap. But let's take a look at how you could ask for help.
I need help. I need help. All right, what do you need help with, Ishmael? All right, well, bring it over here and see if you can match it up. There you go.
So I hope you got it. We're chuckling in here over that video because he obviously knew exactly what to do. He didn't need any help whatsoever.
No.
But a good example, and you can see him there carrying it with the strap. And again, important for Ismail to know how to let someone know that that's a communication device, so that the manager of Walgreens doesn't tell him, you really can't have that while you're working. You need to put that away. Then he can let them know that it's a communication device and he needs that.
And even though it was, like you said, set up and paid, I think it's important that we have those opportunities where we know he doesn't need help, but it's a safe space to practice saying, I need help. And we all know that there's times where maybe we feel like we need help and then we don't. And the way the job coach played into that of like, okay, like if you need help, let's see what you need to do. He didn't actually just jump in, but was there in case he was needed. So I think even though it's set up.
And most students love being able to take ownership and show how they can be a leader in it. And this young man too, being able to have a video where everything goes smooth. There was no sense of failure in it because he's been able to practice. It was set up for pure success. That's also a great strategy to put into place even for our youngers.
Definitely.
Using a combination of tools is very effective too. I know we're focusing today on high-tech AAC, but there are also many other good tools. And when we get into the travel portion specifically, you'll see a lot more of these low-tech tools. But these are tools that are actually used by one of our students currently. She uses a high-tech AAC system, but she also has these cards attached to her wheelchair, and they're on a pulley so that she can just grab them and pull them out as needed. And one of the things that she finds very important to advocate for herself is time. So you'll see that first card says, please wait. And she wrote these messages herself. Please wait. I need time to get my words out. She also, for just quick clarification, she'll pull out that alphabet card and just show you the first letter of each word as she's speaking. And then the bottom card, you can see the 651, that's the St. Paul, Minnesota area code for phone numbers. And she has her full name, her emergency contact information on there, parents' phone number, all of that is there just for quick communication in an emergency. So using a whole range and combination of communication tools is very important.
And I know we get into this further, so I won't spend too much time on it, but having that full range also allows the young adult to make that decision of what's going to work best at that moment. It could be more directed as in how much time is available. Is it someone that has the patience that I'm talking to? So that having that array of tools allows them to communicate in whatever mode is most appropriate at that time.
Or if the battery dies, I just talked to an adult individual and there was no power. And she thought she had enough juice in that device and didn't. And so needing a backup, it's always good to have all the options.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start looking at like, how do we start sooner? There's lots of things that we can be doing from, toddlers on. And one can be something, and I've heard it called responsive aided language input, just kind of, you'll hear modeling, but what we're doing is we're not assigning words right away to them. We're not telling them what to say, but we're saying, hey, your face is telling me that you look kind of frustrated, and they can tell you, no, I'm not. I mean, we've all had those instances, but you could say, you could tell me and show on the device, I need a break. I need, I need space. I'm mad, all of those things. But they still have the opportunity to tell you that you're wrong. But we can start giving them words to go with what their body's feeling.
Can I share one example that actually I witnessed just the other day with Deanna? There was a student that who knows what he needed at that very moment. Wasn't necessarily on task with what our space was hoping he would be on task with. Did have his AAC device with him. And Deanna just sat down next to him, and whatever he said, she responded to using the device and had this dialogue with him. And it wasn't a dialogue of, here's what I need you to do, here's where we need to go. It was just a form of communication to acknowledge how he was communicating back. And as soon as that communication kind of happened and it was like, okay, I feel heard, he was able to continue on with his day too. So it was really important that his voice, even though it may have been slightly atypical of what some others may have been, was acknowledged, and it did promote him being able to move on into the next task.
And the key thing with when we're starting with these, because we'll often, they don't know their feelings, or they're not able to do this. And none of us are able to do this verbally, non-verbally, right away. We have to have those models and start teaching them about the self-regulation. And so if we can start identifying and letting them know, like your facial expression, your body tensing up, or even the opposite. I remember a vivid student who was like mouth wide open in his chair, stiff arms, just like so excited. That was like, this is something I really like, I want more of. And assigning that, like, oh, your body seems to be telling me you really like this. You could tell me more, and tying in your AAC that way. And I do see in the chat window, somebody had another one, verbal referencing. Yeah, that's another way of describing this, just kind of assigning that meaning. So we're going to just show you a couple things on a system, and there we go. So this is Word Power 60 Basic, and this is just a file that Deanna and Michaela and I started playing with, what's in there, what's working well, and adding anything. So a couple key things is just knowing that, like Deanna said, if we're talking about advocating for our device in this, if we go to social and down to my device, there is a button here that,
this is an augmentative communication device,
which you guys
and I'm using it to help me speak.
The way the video plays back. And so just letting them know, you can customize that to be, I use, my Lamp Words for Life, my Word Power, whatever it is. If they say talker, if they say, we've got an individual that named his device, whatever it is, letting people know. And that should be a quick and easy access type button. As well as starting to get into, it's okay if we aren't doing the full sentences, and being able to tell somebody, take a break. That if I say that to Michaela, I need a break. Yes, I'm fully able to show them I need a break.
To take a break.
But sometimes in the spur of the moment, quick and easy, shortening the message can help too. So, all right. So we're going to get to.
Okay, so the next area that we want to talk about under safety and self-advocacy is saying your name. I think out of everything that I've worked on in my career at Focus Beyond, this might be the most important thing, is just being able to say your name clearly to a stranger or an unfamiliar person. It's just so powerful. Our names are important, and it's really important for our young adults to be able to say their names. So this is something that you would work closely with family members as well as the student on figuring out how to program that on the device. Are you going to include first and last name? What about nicknames and other personal identification information as well, such as birth dates? Working closely with the family so that everybody's comfortable for confidentiality with what's on there, addresses, that kind of thing. Are you going to include a nickname? So there's a lot to this, but the point that I want to make is that at Focus Beyond, every communication group or every class we have, we start with introductions. And if we can set it up legitimately, such as maybe there's a visitor in the room or there's a sub there for the teacher, then we take advantage of that and say, hey, we have a new person with us. Let's start by everyone introducing themselves. But if there's no one new in the room, we do it anyway. And I just put it out there to the young adults. We all know each other, but it's so important that we feel comfortable saying our name. So let's everyone go around and introduce ourselves. So that's what we start with. And I would encourage you to start with that and practice that daily, even with very young children. Here's an example of one of our students introducing himself. And I want you to notice the two ways that he does that. Hi there, what is your name?
My name
is Ethan Tao.
Nice to meet you, Ethan.
How are you?
So really nice. And this is the approach that we encourage at Focus Beyond, is using verbal speech along with AAC, both methods together, so that it's truly the student's voice being heard, and then the clarification comes through AAC.
So what does this look like when we're starting sooner? Kids going to doctor's appointments, let them help introduce themselves, or, who do we have here today? Another option is, we do attendance. Deanna and I were kind of brainstorming, like, could we flip it so that we're going around the room, and instead of the teacher saying, is Anna here? Everybody's saying their name and they're marking it off, so that the teacher's just hearing the name and able to check off who's here, and just to provide those opportunities. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I also think we can still do those. We have a substitute, we have a visitor in the classroom. I used to do that even as the speech going into a classroom to get my student, but often you get a lot of kids asking, well, who's that? And I would then ask them, my name's Miss Heather, what's your name? And have those genuine opportunities. So we can start doing that, but allow them in a safe place where you're able to help them. Or as this, diagram showed, maybe it's mom, they're not ready yet, but you could say, hey, you can tell them my name is, and show them where to go, get them ready. And just quick, we won't spend a lot of time, because I think you guys know in your devices, there are pages where you can have that personal information. So under Word Power, we've got, hey,
my name is Joanna.
So just find those, make sure those are set up. And those are those pages that we said, work with the family on what they want. Do they just want first name in there? Do they not want them handing out phone numbers yet? We'll get there.
Another critical skill for safety is saying no, refusal skills. And I find that a lot of our students since young childhood have really been taught to say yes. Young children are supposed to be obedient, and they're supposed to comply with everything that people ask of them. And they haven't had many opportunities to say, no, I don't want that. I don't like that. Stop, don't touch, things like that. And obviously this is critically important for their safety as young adults. And we'll get into this a little bit more later too, but just practicing, I can say no, is really important.
So starting sooner, letting them know those appropriate ways. Again, we can be modeling, hey, it looks like you're not done. You could tell them, stop, my turn. And I have preschool twins that when we were starting to teach them devices, they both needed AAC, and the giggles that ensued when they were saying, stop, my turn, no, my turn, and just having fun with it. But then they paused and handed it, and they had an interaction back and forth. So starting it soon, as well as if we know they have their preferred items. I love broccoli. I don't love it all the time. And so why can't our students with AAC be able to say, that's not my preferred item today? So we need to be modeling, oh, do you want broccoli today? You can say, no, thank you. And Michaela's going to show us later too, that no, thank you has a wide range of uses. So please start using that sooner. There's just so many opportunities to put that in.
Absolutely.
And I'm just going to quickly, again, not to beat a dead horse, but knowing where yes and no, or if they have a nonverbal head shake, accept any of those. I always am a little leery when we force them to use their device to say yes and no, if they have a very distinct yes, no already built in, but knowing where it is in case there's those moments, or providing a full button that says no, thank you.
No, thank you.
Which is okay too. So.
For the sake of time, I think you keep moving forward and save some questions. I know so we thought
I haven't seen questions in the chat window, but please feel free to put them in there, and we're going to follow up with questions towards the end there. So we're going to keep going, but please put them in the chat window as you think of them. Okay.
Perfect. Our next topic is going to be on wellness and sexuality. As a precursor entering into this section, we do have some images of a student that we're very close to that is in the hospital that may have everyone has different backgrounds and different feelings. And just being able to acknowledge that if something makes your heart heavy, or if you need to step away for a moment, please do take care of you in this. And sexuality is also very diverse in discussions and experiences. So same thing, it's a precursor that do what you need to do to be able to stay engaged or come back to being engaged. We appreciate you being here.
So critical skills, let's start with the area of wellness. So it's really important for young adults moving into their adult life to be able to speak for themselves with medical people and first responders. And I think the whole pandemic situation really highlighted the importance of being able to self-report symptoms, expressing how you're feeling, communicating when you're ill. So it's really important to practice those what are called patient-provider communication skills, talking about how you feel and medical conditions. So I just want to say thank you for that, Michaela, that introduction. And we are just going to show you now a picture of a student of ours who's experiencing cancer. And this is Ravi, and Ravi uses a NovaChat 10 device, and you can see him there. And I think this picture, although it is a heavy picture, but it's also a beautiful one. And you can see the joy on Ravi's face. And his mom, Harriet, gave us permission to talk about this with you today. So I just want to really just ask that you would just hold this with respect and with dignity towards this family. Harriet shared with me that having this device, and Ravi calls his device Sam, so having Sam has just made a world of difference for him in getting through this experience of cancer. And I hope that none of your people in your life will ever have to go through this, but when our students who use AAC go through medical crises, it's just so critically important for them to be able to communicate during those experiences. Harriet had sent me an email, and I think it's really powerful, and I just want to read her thoughts as a mother. And again, Ravi is the student and Sam is the AAC device in this email. So I'll read that to you now. Ravi and Sam went to the doctor today and were really good. Ravi was able to say his tummy hurt. He said he was sad when the nurse drew blood and then said he wanted to leave. He was a super good sport, and the doctor was happy to talk to him instead of me. I have noticed a decided difference in how people interact with Ravi now that he has Sam. It's like they just became aware of his humanity and actually has thoughts and ideas to discuss. Doctors are more respectful, and my friends genuinely interact with him. On one hand, this makes me happy. On the other hand, it shows me how far we have to go in teaching people about autism and AAC. So I just want to thank you, Harriet, for your wise thoughts about that and sharing that.
Definitely.
So at Focus Beyond, we're very intentional about practicing patient-provider skills. And you'll see on the screen in the background of this video that we have a script that we use at Focus Beyond. This was developed in conjunction with our nursing staff. And we have specific questions that we go through to practice what a medical appointment interview might look like. And so we start in a very structured way, just with the SLP and the teacher and the students practicing together. And then the next step is the nurse comes into the classroom to practice with the students. So you'll see that here. And then the next step is the students go to the nurse's office and practice with her. So it's a gradual progression. So here you'll just get a little clip of that.
My name is Lady Rainbow Gator.
Good. And when is your birthday?
My birthday is December 23rd, 2001.
Good. And how old are you?
I am 19 years old.
Good. And what are we pretending hurts today? You do have a toothache. Can you show me on your device?
Yes.
This is conversational.
My name is Lady Rainbow Gator. My birthday is December 23rd, 2001. I am 19 years old. Teeth.
You keep hurt. Good job. Can you pretend and tell me how long you've been hurting? A day, a week? A week. A week. Wow. Are you able to eat? Good job. All right, good job, ladies. Awesome, ladies.
Very good. All right, so starting sooner, what can we do? And I think this ties back into what Harriet mentioned, things that we've already been saying that we can be modeling for them, and making sure that medical providers are talking to our individual using AAC. So, oh, you're holding your head, that, you know, you might not be feeling good. You could tell me my head hurts, and have those opportunities. If we're at the doctor's appointment, you obviously scheduled the appointment for a reason, or if we're going to the school nurse, there's a reason you wanted to bring them to the nurse. And so you can provide them options of or at least get them to the page. And that's one thing that Deanna and I worked on together, and whoops, covering up the slide, sorry. There we go, is that sometimes we need to have access to both. And so what we worked on is in Word Power 60 Basic, going to groups and health, we have, you know, something hurts. It's my tongue. You know,
tongue.
Just, that was the first thing I clicked on. But if we're having those doctor's appointments, we might still have to have access to our name or our birth date when they first come in. And that's another great opportunity. And I can then still come back to my health page and then model for them what hurts, if there's anything, medicines that they have, and have those. We also ended up adding and importing from the communication journey aphasia file, the self-advocacy statements. So more of those self-advocacy in here too. So letting them say, you know, please wait, I'm making my message, I'm thinking things through. So just know, use what's there, and then you can add to it as well.
Let's talk now about critical skills for sexuality. I just want to preface this section by saying that sexuality is a difficult topic to talk about, but it's an extremely important topic when students are young, as well as when they move into their adult life. There are many different approaches to how we could talk about sexuality. And so we just want to recognize that there are different ways of approaching this. And I also want to just stress the importance of working on this as a team, working together with family members, with the rest of the team surrounding the person who's using AAC is very important when we're addressing issues of sexuality. This is a really horrific statistic, but it's a true statistic. People with intellectual disabilities are sexually assaulted at a rate 7 times higher than those without disabilities. And so this is something that is just so very important for our vulnerable students and young adults. Whether we acknowledge it or not, our young adults with disabilities are sexual beings. Katie Thune, who is the president and founder of Mad Hatter Wellness, has identified 3 important areas that we could be looking at and teaching our young adults. 1 is consent, 2 is safety, and 3 is body rights. So this is a very large topic, but what we want to do is just talk about one starting point. Where could we get started? And I think talking about our bodies and body parts is a good place to start, especially at a younger age, and then also as we move into young adulthood. Kim Rosso, who is a parent educator with Mad Hatter Wellness, encourages us as a parent of someone who uses AAC to include images and words for all body parts on AAC systems from the beginning. She's a strong advocate of using correct anatomical terms for body parts and teaching those from a very young age.
And with that in mind, just coming back to our health page here, we have our something it hurts. I'm gonna go back in this way, you know, talking about if I say
something hurts,
something hurts, or if I go into my body parts. So again, this is Word Power 60 Basic. As both Michaela and Deanna mentioned earlier, it's a sensitive thing, and that some families are more comfortable, some teams are more comfortable discussing the anatomical words and having them available. So there's lots of body parts already on here if needed. What we did is we just created a second page. So they're there. We have access to them. We can model them. We can show them. But for anybody who maybe that's not their comfort level, it's not the first thing they see. And finding that buy-in for that, then we have access. We can show it. It's, not words we're using every day, all day, but they're there, and make sure that they're there.
And to connect it back to when young children are learning the language as far as body parts go, if we name things such as a flower or use some terms that seem kind of more appropriate for their age level from an adult perspective, the difficulty comes, especially when we have cognitive needs involved as well, is they really do think that flower is that term. So if a situation were to happen and they do need to express that someone may have touched them, so something may have happened, they may have injured, or maybe from a health status that there's pain that needs to be supported. Coming into a doctor and saying my flower is not the same impact of actually naming the body part correctly.
Exactly. And if you're with an individual that isn't familiar with those terms, and you're reporting. So we're trying to teach that consent. We're trying to teach that self-reporting. And so modeling again, so all the examples we've given earlier of showing them where those are, acknowledging that you fell and hit your knee. Okay, this is something I can model, and you can tell me it hurts. So using those, as well as the no thank yous for the consent.
Absolutely. So next up is community and travel. I mentioned before, here in St. Paul, we have a pretty vibrant public transit system. And so some of the essential skills within our public transit skills are being able to increase independence, promote critical thinking skills, and increasing safety. Some may ask, how do we do that? There are 9 essential public transit skills. This is adapted from the New York Public School System travel team. But these 9 skills include attention to task, awareness of environment, negotiating dynamic and static environments, how much movement is happening there, problem solving, appropriate social behavior, recognizing and avoiding dangers and obstacles, initiating, recognizing need and requests for assistance, and decision making. Many of these skills can be worked on as a very, very young person all the way through adulthood. So the critical skills for travel, being able to start to promote students and promote our children to say, I got this, right? I have this skill set. And how do we do that, especially when youth typically respond to more of that adult direction? There needs to be a continuum of how that all works. How do we start to scaffold backwards? And that's part of what we'll discuss next. The other thing is that perception from an adult. A lot of times our students, when they are maybe not as verbal as some other ones, are we holding our students accountable and ourselves accountable for the skills that they do have? This is all a huge part of the process, especially with the students that we're working with. And we need to figure that out. So some of those tools that we use, sorry for my stuttering, some of the tools that we use here in St. Paul are our travel instruction, student interview, and evaluation. One of the best ways we can get to what students are able to do is to ask and have structures around that. So our assessment includes very specific questions that look at the different areas of skills. It also includes visuals as a component right within the assessment. Some of our students, though, those questions are still really complex. And if we look at that complexity and a student is not able to respond, it doesn't mean that they don't have the capacity. So we've also adapted, actually, Deanna and the previous travel instructor adapted, and Heather was involved. Sorry, Heather, I didn't mean to leave you out.
No, it's okay.
Adapted our assessment to be more visual, to still get to the root of what we need to know to say if a student has that independence level to be able to continue on their independence journey in travel. One of the biggest things when we think of starting sooner, I think of it even in my own children, right? How often are we verbally describing that what's happening in our space? Hey, look, our house is next to Bobby's house. Or we pass this and this and this on the way here. Being able to say, parking a car in a grocery store lots, like being able to say, to find our car, we're going to need to make sure we come out this door because we're in front of the letter A of the store. And providing some of that awareness, some of the different changes in the environment that can occur, some of the safety components of how do we get from place to place can happen at these really young ages and only lend to a more independent and successful adult.
And definitely if starting sooner with those landmarks, because they might not have access quickly to their address and those kinds of things, and that's okay. But I have worked with even, young adults and teenagers who weren't familiar with those, but were able to tell me, my house is by the Super America, or you have to go past the big tree that's next to the school. Those kinds of things, we can be doing that at a very young age, as you're standing and waiting for the bus or as you're driving home.
And one of the things that we hope for in this process is to also be able to continue to provide people with that experience of saying, like, I don't need your help right now, too. Just because communication, my communication may be different than yours, doesn't mean I actually need the help. I already have the tools at hand and the skills at hand. Being able to find what works, though, is an important part of travel. And we went back to kind of low-tech items as well, especially on public transit systems. The pace is very quick. You have to be able to get on a bus, find your seat, and communicate very quickly. And for some young adults, that's just a barrier, especially using an AAC device. Mm-hmm. So looking at how do we help support that in that lower tech way, using picture routes, being able to have communication cards that you can show quickly and get the communication out to, again, increase that independence. This really does help support both from a safety lens too. If something were to occur, they've got backups to be able to communicate it efficiently. You can also have students use their voice. There's nothing that says if I have an AAC device or I have cards or I have whatever those tools are, that a student can't say and just voice out what they need. Here at Focus Beyond, we do ask our students to also carry an emergency information card. That card is carried by all students, no matter what communication mode they have. And it includes the statement of, I need help, and how to connect with people either at our school or at their homes, depending on the level of need. One of the things we run into a lot on public transit and just within the community is our community members are generally interested, or they're used to asking for things when they need it. So for example, someone might be sitting on the bus and say, hey, do you know, like, what stop is this? I need to get off here. And no thank you is a great term, no matter what the question is. If they're asking for something, if they're like, hey, do you have $1? No, thank you. Do you know where the stop is? No, thank you. Because many of our students, when we start that engagement, that safety risk does kind of increase on that. So teaching no, thank you as a way to just respond respectfully to others in the community is a huge skill.
And things that we can be doing sooner is working on those interactions. So many times they want to be social. And if somebody interacts first, they are our social butterflies, they want to please, they want to interact, but modeling that maybe this isn't the opportunity. And so giving them those appropriate skills that they can carry with them, I think, as well as just, they observe us in those environments. And so how do you interact with others at the store, on the bus, even at a park, and modeling those kinds of things. So it helps not only for travel, but for that safety in the community, back to our self-advocacy, and back to them being able to communicate effectively.
These important words, no thanks. Another tool that we've used is the visual that says, I don't want to talk, or leave me alone if you need to be have a stronger voice in it. Many of our students, especially when they're gaining that independence, are really working again on those 9 critical skills and how to keep track of their own personal items, how to interact appropriately in public, and how to seek out and solicit help in appropriate ways. So using no thanks is a way to also kind of keep those components of safe and independent travel in play.
So what does this mean for us as we are going to kind of pull this all together wow, the hour has gone by fast.
Mm-hmm.
A key thing is, is practice enough to be practical? I think that was a statement from Deanna, and acknowledging that, it takes a lot of practice. And it's not overnight. And we all, I'm sure, have had those moments where you got the AAC and you're just like, this is going to be opening the doors and it's magical. And they're just going to be able to tell me all the things. And we have to be showing and teaching those skills. They don't just come naturally. And if we aren't able to, or thinking about some of these skills early on, then we don't have enough time to practice. Mm-hmm. The other piece with this is thinking about, and I think we've alluded to this, those quick phrases versus, having our core words and formulating our spontaneous messages. There's a combination. There's a place for all of those. As Michaela said, there are those fast-paced moments where I need to just be able to say, I live at, 1234 Oak Street, and I need to get off at this stop. Can they fully formulate that sentence? A lot of our students, yeah, they can, but the time it takes. And we've all had those times, or those individuals who are like, it just takes too long for them to tell me. Well, know when we need to maybe make a full sentence and have that available, having no thanks, having I need a break, still show them how to make those messages so they have that flexibility, but then teaching them there are times where this might need to be a quick. So again, being able to say, hi, my name is George. I can do that in my social page, but sometimes I need to maybe have that. Or as we saw with our individual calling for the bus, that was pre-programmed because there's a script. There's something I need to be saying.
And I would say in conjunction, when there is more of a scripted language, that's when it usually works the best to have those statements pre-planned. I've had occasions where we've had statements made because in the time it made sense, but it only really applied to that one situation. And then in the next time, when it was slightly different, it actually limited the person with AAC. So thinking of when and how are those statements or like sentences really going to benefit and maximize independence, and when are they barriers?
Exactly. All right. So next steps for you. We want you to reflect on this and kind of just think about it. Our mindset needs to shift. We're the first to say that, what we thought worked well. And as we said, Deanna and I've worked together for many years, and what we did before and what we do now and what we're seeing now has shifted, and that's okay. We don't have to have all the answers right away. And we're hoping that by giving this to you guys, it makes you think a little bit differently, but make sure we're doing teamwork. The best examples are from when it was parents, it was travel instruction, it was case managers, it was SLPs, OTs, job coaches. Bring in your AAC consultant if that's needed too. Just make sure it's a team effort, that it's not siloed, and then start these discussions way sooner. As soon as you're getting that device, start thinking about where do we want them to be in 20 years and how can we start there. A list of some of the references we talked about where we've got time for questions. Yay. There's also our contact information. I'll turn the camera back on, and I did see some, but Beth or Courtney, if you could maybe help facilitate.
We've got lots of questions. So I think one of the first ones that popped through was a question specifically about eliciting responses. So the question was, if you're teaching a student to give the response, I communicate with AAC, what cue do you teach them to respond to know when and when not to say, give certain information to somebody? Since there is likely not one specific phrase or question that will be said to them to elicit this response. I feel for some people, you may not want someone to say this to for safety purposes. So generally, how are we teaching those safety awareness and those types of responses?
That's a great question. How are you guys?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think the way we practice that is similar to practicing our name. So it's practiced in a very structured situation, like let's everybody go around and let's say we use our communication device to help us speak or whatever the message might be. So it's practiced in a very structured way. And then in terms of the safety and security piece of that, it would be handled similarly, I think, to when do you say your full name or when do you give out your phone number? Just talking through those different scenarios in the real world. And since we are community-based, it gives us the opportunity to practice those things in the real situation.
And also say there's components of working with the family again, too. There's always times when developmentally, it may not be the most appropriate to have every piece of personal information available on the device. However, the goal would be, how do they communicate all of that information at those times? So again, developmentally, it may vary, and works closely with your families and really figure out how to teach it and plan it and structure it.
I think the biggest part is just that modeling out loud what we're thinking, like, oh, you know what? We're at the doctor. We do need to say both our first name and last name. Or if I'm on the bus and somebody says, hi, what's your name? We don't need to tell them our whole name. So we just have to practice that verbalizing aloud in those situations too.
Great. I think you guys addressed this one in the last sort of section here, but I do want to just make sure that we ask it. So this one was specifically on the topic of introductions. Do you have a preferred way for students who use low-tech options like POD or PECs or communication books? We've used single message devices, but I wonder if there's something better as we think about the transition out of the school system. Any follow-ups on that?
Yeah, do you have light tech, low tech options where they're doing introductions?
I don't have a lot, actually. I do, just my own personal preference for young adults is that they do have a voice that can be heard. However, on those low tech cards that you saw, that student does have her first name. I didn't show it to you in the slides today, but she has her first name in very large letters on a low tech card so that she can just grab that from her wheelchair and show that to someone for introducing herself just out in the community, as you said, just sort of an informal, oh, hey, what's your name? And she can just show someone her first name quickly.
So yeah, I think it would just be, you look at what you have and think about some of maybe those scenarios and how to introduce it. So if they are using POD or PECs, how are they going to introduce themselves at a doctor's appointment, and just be really concrete and where are those instances and start modeling that.
And lean into the skills that the student is already showing you. If there's a strength area, that would be one to use. If there's a specific way of communication, if it's pointing, maybe everything's on a card. If it's manipulating items and they want that control, going into flipping things forward, or there's many different ways, but what is the most successful for the student at that given time?
And I was going to say, I had a preschool class I worked with where they had it written out and they were working on name recognition to start. But for anybody who was nonverbal and maybe didn't have a system, they would then interact with taking and identifying, this is my name on that card. And then when during attendance, they brought it or put it up on the screen. So that way they...
And in our program for young adults, our students all do. Do you have your badge? I do. We all have these badges.
Sorry, this one.
This one. Your
identification. Apologies.
Yep. So our students all have those too because they're going out on the bus. So that would be a way that our young adults would introduce themselves with a low tech, is just to show their ID card.
And I would say even in our environment, often our adults introduce ourselves to students that way too. If it's a new person or someone that is needing supports and maybe I don't have familiarity, I often walk up and hand this to them and say, my name is Michaela. How can I help?
More great ideas. So the next question, there were several questions, but I'm going to kind of clump them all into one because they all seem to talk about how you have modified the vocabulary. So you showed a lot of examples of word power. So one of the questions was, where is the self-advocacy page on Nova Chats? somebody asked specifically about quick fires on NovaChat or in WordPower and specific sexuality body parts. And do these pages already exist?
Good questions. I'm going to grab chat editor, and I apologize. I was hoping to have more than just WordPower up today, and technical difficulties prevented me. Within like Touch Chat, NovaChat, there is, and what we imported, and I think I saw Courtney also put in, is this communication journey aphasia file has conversation control and self-advocacy. On the conversation control, it has, I use this tablet. Please let me finish talking, those kinds of things. I need extra time to talk to you. So finding some of those things in there, it's not pre-programmed into WordPower, so we imported it in. As well as with the sexuality, they weren't pre-programmed, but some of the words are already in there, or the symbols are there. And so really figuring out what it is that we need for that particular individual. So I hope that helps. And same thing with Lamports for Life or in Unity files. They're in there. They weren't necessarily pre-programmed onto the body parts page, but the symbols are there. You can add them in for the sexuality, and then finding those spots where you want to have those quick fires of I need more time to have that available.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway I'm hearing is that the words and symbols, the symbols are available in the library. The pages aren't necessarily pre-programmed in because it is highly independent of the user.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Great. A couple more questions. So there was one person asked specifically about how are you guys able to chat with adult students about sexuality? Their administration says they're not allowed to discuss those things. So they're not allowed to review social stories with students about their bodies, masturbation, etc.
Great question.
Do you have anything to share?
Well, there is a uniqueness because we are in an 18 to 21 program, and some of our students are their own guardians. So there is a component of that. There is also the collaboration again with families.
Mm-hmm.
If an IEP team is noticing that there is goals and needs around it, that IEP team helps to develop what are those goals and what tools do we have to support them. It is an uncomfortable situation for many, and there is some legalities around what is shared or what isn't shared. So I would recommend continuing to have discussions with it, continuing to brainstorm. Many students do have access to some information around that 5th and 6th grade, and many of our students don't. They're excluded from that. So lean into the health curriculums that maybe are more in our general education environments and compare, are my students having that same access to the curriculum? And then if they aren't, how do we adapt this and how do we move forward? Because if they are within our standards of practice for other students, they should be within our standards of practice for our students too.
And I would say too, looking, since I have worked in other with other districts that are kind of in those similar situations where you're saying we're not allowed to, bringing at the IEP meeting, talking with the family about, especially that statistic that they're vulnerable, that they are, 7 times more likely to be assaulted sexually, having those discussions, but then, guiding the parents that, okay, if we can't do this discussion at school, these are still things, and here's some information that I can give you that you can be modeling at home. And I see kind of in the message window too, that we could, we talk about bathing suits and that sort of thing. In those moments, we're not overly getting into the sexuality, but you're starting to talk about those body parts and go from that aspect. That has worked for some teams where it's just we work together with the family. Obviously, you don't do this by yourself. Mm-hmm. Even if you think it's best practice, it's with the family and help guide them. Ultimately, they're the ones who are probably going to spend more time on this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to take into consideration cultural, looking at this through a cultural lens too.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
I know we are over time, and if there's more questions, we want to stay on, but reminding everyone, and I saw it in the chat window, this is being recorded. We will have it up on our YouTube channels that you can share out. So people had asked about sharing videos. You'll be able to see the videos in the recording. So please feel free to share those, and we'll remind everybody once it's up there that it's out. So, but we have more time for more questions if there are.
It's like you read my mind, Heather. I was just getting ready to say that.
We worked so closely together, Courtney.
We do had just a couple, just two last questions really, related to sharing and some recommendations. So one was, are you able to share the script that you all used for medical appointments?
How would we, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to share it.
I was gonna say, we can
Beautiful way
upload,
of
yeah, we
sharing
could upload it to the content area where your handout was. I can
Yeah,
get that
happy to
and
share that with you.
put it into your AAC learning journey content area. So if you come back into your My Courses and learning plans where your handout was, we can definitely put that in there.
And feel free to use that freely and also to tweak it for your
Mhm.
setting. That would be great.
Great. I would say give us, a week or two about the
Yeah.
same time and get the video posted. Don't check in an hour, but
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll be happy. And then the last thing that came through a couple times was that you were talking a lot specifically about carrying straps. So any recommendations or go-to favorites for carrying straps and cases for iPads that you can't live without?
Yeah, well, my go-to, I mean, the Nova Chats come with straps, which is fabulous. Some people don't realize that there's a strap in there. You kind of have to find it in there. But that's the first thing we dig out of the box. So if you get a Nova Chat, it's awesome because it comes with a carrying strap. And then my go-to iPad case is Bracen. Am I allowed to say this?
Go for it.
Bracen. I love that case. It's very sturdy. The one thing that's really tricky on the iPad cases is the attachment where the strap attach. They always break. And so I've been looking for a case where that attachment piece is really sturdy, and I haven't had any issues with the Bracen. So that's the one that is my go-to.
And I usually will, as kind of that consultant perspective, talking to teams like, okay, if we want them to carry it, is it finding an iPad case you love or an iPhone case with a strap, whatever it is, make sure that that's part of your decision making. Like, is this going to last? And we've had plenty of instances where it was like, yeah, they could have done an iPhone or an iPad, but we needed the durability of that case with that strap, and it is what it is. So yeah, most devices, as you said, come with those, but then find one and make sure it works for them, or some way for them to carry it.
Great. That was all the questions that I saw.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we really appreciate everyone joining us today. Middle of the day, we appreciate that definitely. And look for the recording. Feel free to share that out. And if you have questions, let us know.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.